Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Steltori, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last, 4 years now, since 2021, I have been featuring the Fille du Roi. I started off episode 1, and today we're doing, yes, episode 300. Can't believe it. Just amazing, amazing journey that we've been on together. And each time I research one more Fille du Roi, I truly do find out one new thing each time. I wish I could go back and redo the earlier videos, and maybe someday I will. But for right now, we're just moving ahead. I believe there are about 700 who actually left descendants, they Fille du Roi, and we will be completing all of them. And now we are presumably at the halfway mark. So thank you to all of you over these several years who have stood by me and supported me and corrected me, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. There are a couple ways you can support the channel. You can subscribe, like, and notify. The next are ways to help the channel grow financially, which is through a YouTube membership, and it starts at 99 cents a month, and you can cancel anytime. Different perks as you go through the different levels, and all the way up to $24.99. And there's also on my website the PayPal button that you can look at. And I understand that there's now a super thanks that you can do per episode as well. So each and every one of you, thank you so much to all of you who have done that. Really appreciate your time and attention and dedication to helping me become a better YouTuber. So with that being said, let's get started and get to know our Fille du Roi. This episode of Les Filles du Roi, episode 300, is Elisabeth Lequin. I can't believe we made it to episode 300, but we have, and it means we're halfway there. And this particular Fille du Roi is a viewer request, and she's also the great-grandmother of a very dear friend of mine who was one of my childhood and young adult best friends. It was born in 1648 in Paris, France. Her parents were Pierre Lequin and Catherine Bourdieu. She is born in the first arrondissement of Paris. You can see by the circles that Paris is laid out that way. The first arrondissement of Paris is one of the most historical because of the fact that it is also known as Louvre. This arrondissement is situated principally on the right bank of the River Seine. It also includes the west end of the Ile de la Cité. This locality is one of the oldest areas in Paris, and the Ile de la Cité was at the heart of the city of Lutetia, which was conquered by the Romans in 52 BC. Parts on the right bank date back to the early Middle Ages. It's the least populated of the city's arrondissement, a very small one. A very large part of this arrondissement is covered by the Louvre Museum that you see on the bottom left, and the gardens, the Tuileries Gardens. And then there is also the Forum des Halles, which is the largest shopping center in Paris. But at the time that she was actually, living, obviously it was very historical. The church that she would have been baptized in, Saint-Germain de l'Auxerrois, has existed since the earliest times, 300, 400 AD. And the current church was built in the 13th century with major modifications in the 15th, 18th centuries. From 1608 until 1806, it was actually the parish church for the inhabitants of the palace. And many notable artists and architects who have worked on the palace have had their tombs in the church. When the 2019 fire of Notre Dame occurred, the cathedral's regular services had been held at Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, which gives you an indication of how large it is. I want to share a little known fact of defiance by the Fille du Roi. And in 1667, about 25 of them were stranded at Dieppe. and they protested against the Compagnie des Indes Occidentales. They had been promised provisions and care, and instead they were left neglected and left hungry. They filed a formal complaint with a notary, demanding fair treatment. Their struggles didn't end there. On the ship St. Louis, they suffered from hunger and mistreatment. When they arrived in Quebec, the intendant, Jean Talon, acknowledged their ordeal, but urged them to keep quiet. He feared bad press would stop future recruits. This petition is truly proof of their courage. They weren't just settlers. They weren't just women looking for a husband. They were women who were fighting for their rights. And I just cannot believe how brave they must have been. Their voices deserve to be remembered. And Elisabeth was one of them who actually signed this petition. Elisabeth arrived on the Saint Louis de Dieppe on September 25th, 1667. There is no mention of a dowry in any of the records that I have found. The groom that she selected and who selected her, his name, Jean Gagne de la Framboise. He was born in 1642 in Tours, and he was in France. His parents were Pierre Gagnard and Anne de la Planche. Now, Tours is part of the Centre-Val de Loire region, and inside of that region it can be found the département de Indre et Loire, and it is truly renowned area. It's renowned for its rich history, its medieval architecture, and as a gateway to the Loire Valley chateaus. The city has several notable parishes and churches, and it was the commune of Tours has about 136,000 people, so it's no small chicken. And the entire population in the metropolitan area is about 500,000. Tours became a part of the Roman Empire during the 1st century, and by the 4th century it was renamed Tours, and its famous amphitheater was built. Following a fire, the church and its presbytery were rebuilt from 1460. Église Saint-Pierre-du-Bois had existed since at least the 11th century. That's sort of an illustration of it on your left. It was seized in 1792 during the Revolution and destroyed. Jean would arrive in New France, as so many had before him, with the Carignan-Salers soldiers. He was part of the Montaigne regiment, and he arrived here on June 30th, 1665. On July 5th, 1668, they were married at Quebec City. So they would settle at Quebec City. Let's review a little bit about this remarkable place. It's the capital of the province of Quebec. 500,000 people live directly in Quebec City. Quebec was originally named by the Algonquins, who named the area Quebec, which in their native language meant where the river narrows. Quebec City lies where the St. Lawrence River narrows. Samuel de Champlain founded a French settlement here in 1608 and called it Ville de Quebec. The city walls that were built back then are still present, and marking the fact that Quebec City is the only city in North America that still has city walls protecting it. There's so much to see in Quebec City, but I wanted to point out a few things that would have been here when Elisabeth was here. We have this building dates from 1675, Maison Jacquette on the upper left. This is a historical illustration of what the settlement of Quebec City probably looked like, or very close to it. Then we have today's scene on the right. This is the British Champlain Shopping Center, which claims to be the oldest shopping mall or district in North America. We have those city walls, what I talked to you about, on the upper left, the bottom left, I'm sorry. And then in the middle left, we have, this is a depiction of the Plains of Abraham, which were fought 100 years later, but obviously were existing. And Abraham Martin, that was his land. So these are important. The reason why Quebec City is Quebec City is because it is truly the birthplace of Quebec. To some extent, Canada as well. I mean, everything kind of started there as well. So it's very important to understanding Canada and to understanding Quebec to be able to walk the walk, and Quebec City will permit you to do that. He will go on to have two children, both of whom died in infancy or very shortly thereafter, Elisabeth and Jean-Louis. Jean would pass away in 1670 as well, and just a tremendous year of loss for her, losing two children and a husband, and also the fact that Jean died so young. He hadn't even reached the age of 30 yet. I think he was about 28. So this is just shocking. And here she finds herself in a new country and basically on her own. What is to become of her? And the second groom, the one who comes in really as her knight in shining armor, is Etienne Leveillé, and he was born in 1641 in Rouen, France. His parents were François Leveillé and Alison Vivier. Now, Rouen is the capital of Normandy, France, and it has a rich history dating all the way back to its founding by the Romans as Rotomagus. In 843, it became the capital of the Duchy of Normandy under Viking leader Roland. The city prospered as a commercial hub during this medieval period. Joan of Arc was tried and burned alive here in 1431 in this area. Rouen is a city of such cultural and educational significance. It played a prominent role in both English and French histories from the 11th to the 15th century. The Church of Saint Maclou in Rouen began in 1437, replacing an earlier Roman church. The church is dedicated to Saint Maclou, one of the 7 founder saints of Brittany. And you can see how magnificent Saint Maclou still is. It's just one of those churches that kind of takes your breath away. And just a little tiny tidbit, it was from this area that the Statue of Liberty sailed to America in June of 1885. Exactly sure when Etienne would come to New France, but we know obviously that he would have had to be there by 1671. I suspect he probably came around 1668, established himself. He was an upholsterer, and which is an unusual profession even at that time. And but certainly that is the profession that is listed, and he would have probably been able to secure a land, a home, to be able to offer to Elizabeth some form of security. On February 8th, 1671, they were married at Quebec City. And let's see what happens next. The family would then settle at Neuville. Neuville is one of the oldest European settlements in Canada, located about 30 kilometers west of Quebec City. It began in 1653 as a seigneurie and to Jean Bourdon de Saint-Jean, who gave it to his son, Jean-François Bourdon de Dombourg. In 1680, the Dombourg seigneurie was acquired by Nicolas Dupont de Neuville, which is why it's called Neuville. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as Dombourg, and it's important to know that Dombourg and Neuville are essentially the same place. Now, many of the early settlers were farmers and craftsmen from Normandy and other areas, and in 1679, the Saint François de Sales parish was formed. The place was also known, the church, as Pointe aux Trembles, in reference to the point on which the church was built, which once was covered with aspen and birch. And I've seen this particular point get confused with the Pointe aux Trembles in Montreal. Please be aware that the church was called Pointe aux Trembles. The parish at some points was called that. And Pointe aux Trembles is a suburb, or a city, actually it was a city in these times, in Montreal. So make certain you don't go off on the wrong direction. Now, let's have a look at the family that they created. Would go on to have 6 children. Etienne would die at 5 years of age. Pierre would marry Jeanne Girard and have 10 children, 8 of whom survived, 7 of whom left descendants. Elisabeth married Adrien Pichet and had 4 children, all of whom survived. Adrian's mother was a Fille du Roi, Catherine Durand, who we profiled way back in episode 20, and I've provided the link. Jean married Marguerite Auger and would have 7 children, 5 of whom survived and left descendants. Etienne would pass away at age 19, and Jean-Baptiste would die at 5 years of age. The 1681 census finds Etienne and Elisabeth. Notice that they've actually put in Isabelle. Remember, I have said many times that Elisabeth and Isabelle are actually interchangeable. And it notes that she was the widow of Jean Gagne. And their children, Pierre, Elisabeth, Jean, Etienne, they have 1 gun, 2 bêtes à cornes, and 14 enfants en valeur, about 12 acres of land. In 1887, she had lost her second husband. Etienne was buried on the 6th of December, 1687. He and Jean-Baptiste, the son, probably were victims of that year's smallpox epidemic. Just so tragic. The third husband who would come to her aid, his name was Pierre Girard, and he was born in 1641. We don't know where, and we don't know his parents. We know that he was a bargeman, and that he arrived in New France in 1660 as a contracted employee with the Jesuits, and would eventually marry Suzanne Lavoie, with whom he had 8 children. Now, a bargeman, as you may not know, is someone who works on a barge, which is a type of flat-bottom boat, and that would transport goods and people and supplies along the rivers and the lakes. You can imagine how essential this role was in New France. I thought it might be interesting to explore the family of Pierre and Suzanne, only because Elisabeth would now have that family as an adopted family. And perhaps in your tree, you might have some linkages based on this shared connection. Ben would pass away at age 10. François would marry Antoinette Lemay and have 9 children, 8 of whom would make it to adulthood. Antoinette's mother was Michelle Wainville, who we profiled in episode 10. I've provided the link for you. Madeleine Marguerite would marry Daniel de Nevers and would have 1 child who would survive. Pierre would marry Catherine Angélique Huard and would have 4 children, 2 of whom would make it to adulthood. And Marie-Angélique Dolbeuk, who would have 4 children, 3 of whom would make it to adulthood. Jean-Baptiste would die at the age of 12. Ben would marry Pierre Leveille and would have 10 children, 8 of whom would make it to adulthood, 7 of whom would leave descendants. Françoise would marry Noël Berthiaume and would have 9 children, 6 of whom would make it. And Pierre-Louis would marry Marguerite Tardif and would have 8 children, 7 of whom would make it to adulthood. And the family would decide to move to Saint-Augustin-de-Demars. And it's an interesting fact that 17 Filles du Roi would eventually settle in this very tiny, tiny place. And you can see on the upper left of your screen, it is circled. Elisabeth Lequin is there. She is one of the 17 Filles du Roi. The history of Demars starts with Jean Jussereau, Lord of the Mar, who's given the seigneury that includes this small village. By 1668, the territory begins to be occupied. It was then called Demars. By 1671, a community mill was established at Lake Saint-Augustin by the son of the original lord, also named Jean Jussereau. And by 1685, Paul Augustin Jussereau de Mar became the 3rd seigneur of this community. The name of the parish most probably comes from his first name, Saint Augustin. In 1691, the establishment of this parish is recognized. Although there are no official documents that prove this date, it's the unofficial start of the parish. At that time, there were approximately 200 people living in this tiny little community. Elisabeth would pass away on the 12th of February, 1700, at the age of 52. She would leave us 43 descendants. But imagine all that she had seen. 3 husbands, and she died at 52. Just phenomenal. Pierre himself would pass away 10 years later. More information that you can find on Pierre Girard, and you can access the file on this on our Free French Canadian Ancestors. It's a Facebook group. And if you do not have access to Facebook or don't want to be on it, you can also possibly look for this in one of your libraries. I believe the other night I was on Family Search, and I think they are beginning to have some of these. Please let me know in the comments below if, in fact, Family Search is starting to, scan these and have these uploaded. Not sure about that, but wanted to mention that. Certainly, whenever we can have information about any person that has touched the life of one of our ancestors, it's a good thing. Tremendous life Elisabeth had. To survive, to go the unspeakable tragedy of losing 2 children and a husband in the same year, getting married, having another family, and having children, a couple of them dying, and then having the death of a second husband through smallpox, surviving that, carrying on. Just a remarkable woman. And yes, she died relatively young at 52, but what a life. And we are so grateful that she came to our shores and was one of those founding families in Neuville, at Quebec City, at Saint-Augustin. She made a mark. So if you are a descendant of this wonderful woman, you can be very, very proud. Thank you, Elisabeth, for coming to our shores and for your extraordinary contribution. We bless you, and we are thankful for you, and we bless your memory. And with that, I say thank you to my patrons and supporters. Thank you so much. Each and every one of them. It's growing every month, so I really appreciate all the support I've been given. And with that, I will say au revoir until we meet again on episode, I guess it'll be 301. Take good care. Au revoir.